The North Sea is one of the most heavily industrialized bodies of water on Earth. It is a harsh, gray expanse, defined almost entirely by human engineering and fossil fuel extraction. Every week, thousands of cargo vessels and passenger ferries cross its surface, while commercial trawlers drag heavy nets across the seabed, and drilling rigs pump millions of barrels of oil from the bedrock. But for decades, those commercial fishing crews have been hauling up something that doesn't belong in the ocean. Entangled in their massive nets are the unmistakable remains of terrestrial life. Crews routinely pull the massive femurs of woolly mammoths onto their decks, alongside the jawbones of brown bears and the fragmented skull caps of early Neanderthals. In 1931, a trawler operating miles out at sea made an even more precise discovery: an intricately carved 13,000-year-old spearhead crafted from red deer antler. These artifacts were found encased in chunks of moorlog, solid, compressed blocks of ancient peat soil that forms strictly in freshwater bogs. The presence of freshwater peat and land-dwelling mammals indicates that the bottom of the North Sea was once entirely dry. This submerged ecosystem represents the buried history of the people who lived there. For much of the 20th century, archaeologists dismissed this dry seabed as a simple land bridge. They assumed it was a narrow, temporary corridor that early humans used to migrate between mainland Europe and the British Isles. Geologic evidence has since revealed the true scale of the territory. This area, known as Doggerland, was a sprawling, continuous landmass, roughly the size of a modern European country. Nomadic communities do not march endlessly across empty corridors. They settle where resources are abundant. Doggerland was the populated heartland of Mesolithic Europe. Understanding how they lived requires mapping an entire drowned continent. Excavating a site the size of a country is difficult on land. Doing it under 30 meters of freezing, opaque seawater is physically impossible. Archaeologists bypassed this obstacle by partnering with the offshore fossil fuel industry. They acquired multi-million-dollar 3D datasets originally gathered for oil and gas exploration. These specialized research vessels trail arrays of hydrophones, firing acoustic pulses deep into the seabed. The sound waves bounce back at different speeds depending on the density of the rock and sediment layers below. Supercomputers process those raw acoustic echoes into a three-dimensional topographic map, draining the ocean to reveal the ancient Earth. The terrain exposes distinct geographic features, like the massive Southern River, a winding waterway cutting through an outcrop into a wide basin. Mapping these ancient freshwater networks is critical. Just as they do today, early human populations clustered heavily around estuaries and riverbanks for drinking water, transportation, and hunting. While a topographic map provides the geographic skeleton of the continent, it is only a bare framework. The contours of a valley alone cannot tell researchers what plants grew there or what animals drank from the rivers. To figure out what actually lived on that landscape, scientists had to physically pierce the ocean floor and retrieve direct organic evidence. They dispatched research ships to drop mechanical dredges directly into the surveyed riverbeds, extracting tightly packed cylinders of sand, chalk, and ancient soil. At these depths, the bottom of the North Sea maintains a near-constant temperature of 4 degrees Celsius. It functions as a massive natural refrigerator, preserving organic matter for thousands of years. Evolutionary geneticists take teaspoon-sized samples from these cores and sequence the environmental DNA trapped inside. This identifies the microscopic, localized traces of the exact flora and fauna that once lived there. The genetic data reveals a dense, thriving ecosystem. Estuaries bordered by marshland and seagrass gave way to expansive deciduous forests of oak and hazel, supporting migrating herds of red deer and wild boar. The DNA sequences reveal Doggerland as a temperate forest biome, a resource-rich environment that sustained human communities for millennia. This period of abundance coincided with the start of the Holocene epoch, roughly 11,700 years ago. Global temperatures began to rise, and the massive European ice sheets retreated northward. As millions of tons of glacial ice melted, the water poured into the oceans, causing global sea levels to climb steadily. This quantitative map illustrates the inundation scale. Rising salt water crept up the estuaries, drowning river valleys and shrinking the continent over thousands of years. Eventually, only the highest hills remained above the surface. The landmass was reduced to a fragmented archipelago of isolated islands. The slow encroachment of the sea culminated in a sudden geological disaster. Around 6200 BCE, a massive section of the continental shelf off the coast of modern-day Norway destabilized and collapsed into the deep ocean. The sheer force of the landslide displaced a colossal volume of water, forcing it upward to create a massive wave. This mega tsunami surged south, sweeping over the remaining low-lying islands of Doggerland and decimating the coastal settlements. That wave permanently submerged the last dry land connecting Britain to the European continent, wiping a prehistoric civilization from the map. The ocean settled into the separate landmasses and coastlines we recognize today. When the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers faced encroaching tides, their survival strategy was straightforward. They migrated to higher ground. Today, human populations are bound by rigid national borders and dense, immovable infrastructure. Currently, an estimated 190 million people live on coastal land that is projected to fall below sea level by the year 2100. This forensic resurrection of Doggerland provides a stark geological warning. Modern coastlines remain entirely subordinate to the shifting forces of nature.